So today we're here to talk about APIs, and APIs are kind of the heart of systems. In any system, you've got an awful lot of data that you've got to interface to. On the project that I'm working on right now, we've got IoT devices, third-party databases. We've got a whole bunch of external APIs, manual uploads, legacy systems that run in SharePoint, and data from drones and UAVs, which is like huge amounts of data as well. Like it's really a lot. All of that comes into an API, and then it can be served up, in whichever way it's being ingested. So the API layer becomes really crucial in all this, and it's actually the thing about APIs is that they're the heart of a system. They're what makes systems able to be scaled. So if you're doing like any sort of serious development, at some point in time, you will need to package your interfaces to your workup so other people can consume it, or you'll need to work with APIs from other people who have done the same thing so you can consume their data. In today's world, scalable apps are API driven. Next week, we'll be going through a session on MCP and MCP servers and showing you how that makes working with APIs a lot easier. And it really is a bit of a game changer. But this session is particularly focused on development of APIs, so we'll run through what that looks like. Just in terms of the community, the Product Foundry is set up to allow people to sort of progress in their journey. And generally, if you sort of look at like how people progress in a space like this, you go from familiarity where you've heard of something, you're aware that it's a possibility. If you've got good instructions, you can then go and kind of do it. And you kind of get to a point where you need some checklists and stuff, and that will help you kind of do it. Then next step up is where you can kind of do it, but it takes a bit of effort. And then finally, you kind of get to a point where you're able to do, sort of work which has got like, sort of at a professional level. What we're looking to do through this community is basically bring people up the curve fast. So to get you from the point of view of familiarity up to proficiency, or if you want to go for unconscious competence, then obviously we can help people aim for that as well. There's a chunk of resources coming available to help you guys go through that. But just before I jump into that, what we've got just in terms of accelerating your experience in this, and this goes for anything as well, actually, not just coding, but mastery requires doing. It's not just a case of knowing it, you need to do it as well. So the goal of the community is to support you guys in real life practice. And the research says that what works best is practicing in groups, learning deliberately. So having a bit of a plan, getting feedback, reflecting often and applying consistently. So what is set up now to sort of help support all this is obviously these hands-on sessions, the support on Discord, which I encourage you guys to jump on and sort of share your story and help other people out as you go. There's a learning guide, which I'll take you through in a second, and then the hackathons and coding challenges and following sort of, a series of instructions. It's really helpful. And for those that want it, I offer personalized guidance as well. I'm just going to jump to the website now and just take you through sort of how you can access all of these resources. So this is on the Product Foundry site. The live coding labs will now take you through to the community page, and here you can sort of have a look at all the events that are coming up and jump in and attend the events that you want to do. In the community phase, you can link through to the guide, which will take you through in a second. Join the Discord chat, volunteer to help. Volunteering is just got a little form in which you can kind of say in what way you want to volunteer, if that's what you want to do. And of course, you can sign up for the newsletter as well. For those that want to, and I'll cover this off a bit later, there's a school that's sort of going to help people accelerate their learnings. So we'll come back a bit later. But these are all resources that are there to help people accelerate your learning. So, backing up these hands-on sessions with the ability to actually go through and practice stuff and do it yourself for real. So feel free to jump in and kind of grab what are those resources that are helpful for you guys. That's what it's there for. So let's come back and talk about APIs. I'm going to go through APIs in a couple of kind of key technologies, which we'll look at putting in place in the video today. The first one is FastAPI. So FastAPI is a modern high-performance Python web framework. It's really great for building APIs. It builds in the documentation, which is really important, and it works really, really well with SQLModel as well, which I'll talk about in a second. Kong is a piece of tech, which is a gateway, which we'll cover off in a second. And then Swagger and Redoc is documentation, which creates really good, solid documentation for your APIs. The way that an API would typically look is you would have your client that's sort of here, and then your gateway manages that. One gateway will manage a number of APIs, so you only need kind of one of these for a number of APIs. This does quite a bit of heavy lifting. It's not needed in the development stage, but when you get to the point of doing deployment, you do need to have something which is working as a gateway. And I'll talk about why in a second. Endpoints is what we'll build a whole bunch of endpoints on this session. And then you've got your documentation as well. So just in terms of some of the tech, which is really important to be aware of, FastAPI is built on top of Pydantic. So it sort of has built-in validation and type parsing. Pydantic, one of the challenges with Python is that Python allows you to have types without any sort of strict typing. Pydantic gives you that validation. So Pydantic is used in all of the major LLMs. It's just this massively useful library. SQLModel is built by the creator of FastAPI. So previously, FastAPI was you would tend to build stuff on top of SQLAlchemy. SQLAlchemy is good. The problem is that when you went to go and do your validation, you'd have to go and build like effectively double logic. So it became a bit of a pain in the backside to do. SQLModel is designed to work flawlessly with FastAPI. So you define your database models in Pydantic schemas, and they double as the request response types. So it's really, really good to use SQLModel. It also works with Alembic, which is something that's used for migration, so quite helpful. Pydantic, like I said, if you haven't played around with this, I'd recommend that you have a look into it. It's fantastic for validation and making sure that your data is actually in the structure and format you want it to be in. It's probably not super necessary to know much about this at this stage. We'll come back to this maybe at the end of the session, but just in terms of how an API is set up, you've got your external access, which comes through a gateway generally. Then you handle the requests. Those requests can go through like a layer logic, and then you get your data access and also your data definition, and then straight through to your documentation as well. So this is sort of the flow of an API. It's probably not too much to worry about that at this point. What is helpful to know about is Kong as a piece of kit. Kong is great. It provides a number of services. You can use Nginx to do the same sort of thing, but Nginx has got a broader function. Kong is specifically designed for use with APIs. So in terms of covering off things like authentication, rate limiting, security, logging, load balancing, all of that stuff, Kong does it, and it does it really well. You can do that with Nginx, but it's more complex to configure, and it's more kind of it's more difficult to maintain. So I personally would recommend that you use Kong for gateways in API development, but of course Nginx is an option, and it's been used by a lot of people over the years. Kong is kind of the best practice to use in this space at this point in time. Why choose Kong? Why am I saying this is a good thing? Well, it does all of these things. So you can see that Nginx does a bunch of stuff, but it doesn't have a good plugin ecosystem. It's got a difficult kind of challenge to manage, and you need like a whole bunch of custom sort of configurations on top of it. You can do it, and it's if you're familiar with Nginx, I'd say stick with it. But if you are coming at this fresh, I would suggest you jump into Com. In terms of testing APIs, and we'll cover this a little bit later on, if you haven't previously done any testing with APIs, Postman is just the default sort of standard that everyone uses. It's really, really good for testing and managing APIs. You don't have to develop a front end. You can just set this up and then send through your API request without writing code. This lets you really quickly kind of test stuff and see that it's working as you want it to. And then effectively, you can sort of accelerate your development cycle. So having got through the development, Postman is what I would suggest is the way to go. Okay, coding time. So we're going to jump into writing some code. We're going to go through the usual kind of space. Before we do that, though, I'm going to take you guys through the online documentation just to show you how to navigate that and to show you kind of where this the output of the session will go. So if we go back to the website here, from here you'll see that we have the community guide is under our community section. You jump in through here and this will bring you into the it's up on GitHub. You should be able to access this directly. I'll just chuck this in the chat to make sure you guys can all access this. And this is where you'll find kind of everything come together. So what you'll see in here is we've got some of the sessions from previous live coding outputs. Now, this is not guaranteed to work correctly, but it gives you guys an idea of the code that was generated. You know, that's so people can follow along with the sessions. Okay, Raymond, thanks. Upcoming events is actually covered off in here. The prompts that we cover off and we use in this session is under the prompts here. So previously that was a bit harder to access, but now you can jump in here and see all those prompts for the different types of use cases that we want to feed into the LLM. The session notes is going to be where a lot of the information comes together. So for example, in here, you'll see the session notes on MCP, which I've just come off running, and that gives you sort of a blow-by-blow detail of how to configure everything. So these are the instructions that you can come back and actually follow through when you're trying to come off a call like this and be like, oh, what did he do? This will take you sort of step by step. These are the things to follow along to make all this sort of stuff happen. These instructions are being put together right now. They're not going to be perfect. There'll be sort of some bugs in them, and there'll also be some things where I've got stuff installed which I therefore miss steps. So what I would say to you is if you're following these steps and they're not working for you, let me know, jump onto Discord and actually let everyone know, and then we can fix it up and get them to a point where it's working for everyone. There are a few people now sort of volunteering to help out with some of this stuff, and so there's more than just myself putting some of these instructions together. So it's good to tell everyone on Discord that that's kind of that you've had some issues, and then people can sort of fix them up nice and quick. This, as it grows out, there will be a bunch of instructions in here for a bunch of different types of things, and the point is to get you guys to a point where you can kind of work through stuff really quick. You'll also see on here there's a couple of slide decks of the courses. So in this case here, we've got the API one, there's the database one there as well. So if you want to go back and look through the course notes, you can jump into these session notes and have a look through there. I'm starting to bring together some templates as well. So if you're looking to do a data project, there's a template for data projects. If you're looking to do MCP, there's some basic stuff to do MCP servers. Again, we'll build this out as we go, so there's templates to jump in and grab. And then probably what is really cool is this, I think is probably the most useful part, is this dev part, where in the dev, there's a description of all of the different types of kit that I use. And then in the different sections here, you'll find the details of that. This one is particularly useful, which is the way to set up VS Code to do data projects. This is kind of a good set of instructions to follow along, and I suggest you guys check it out. It's quite useful. But following along that will get you to a point where you're up and running with kind of a good development environment that will get you working a bit faster. Some of these things make a big difference, so it's worth spending the time to get the foundational stuff right. And keep in mind, as I said, this is all coming together, so it's not perfect by any means. But that's the resources that are there to support you guys getting up to speed with the development. You better jump in and work through it. And then if you do find issues, let me know so we can fix them up. So without sort of, further ado, let's jump into the coding itself. Now, we're going to walk through the steps of doing all this stuff. Literally like a week ago, I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to create an API to serve up the prompts. And in the course of a week, I'm like, well, first of all, MCP has a function for serving up prompts, which I'll cover off next week. But at this point in time, we're actually served up through the online repo. So that's not the case. I need to fix it up. We've got a series of prompts, and we'll work through that. I think you guys all saw it last time, but it's going to be a similar sort of process. Just in terms of where we are and the kind of use of tools, over the last week, OpenAPI has brought out 4.1, which has some advantages. So 4.1 has a 1 million token window, which is great. Still doesn't seem to be as good as coding at Claude 3.7. Gemini also has a 1 million window token, and for me at this point in time is the preferred model, not least of which because it's free, but it does actually seem to give the best results. So I'm still sort of saying at this point, stick with Gemini. It's really good, and I actually think that Google's going to continue to do great things in this space. They're really sort of gathering steam. Claude is the other one to watch because they're focused on business applications. So I do, if I had to pick two, recommend two out of this, I would be picking Gemini and Claude as my go-tos in development. But yeah, that's kind of where that's at. I have a little bit played with DeepSeek, and I've found it to be a little bit, like, I think it's good. The problem with DeepSeek I found is that I personally haven't found it to be reliable, like in terms of the connection. It could just be me. So yeah, that's kind of where that's at. I don't recall if I mentioned this last time, but Firebase Studio has been bought out by Google. Previously, for developing front-end applications, I was recommending Bolt.new as a starting point. Firebase Studio is just fantastic. It's really, really good. If you have a quick look at this, it's just a front-end developer where you put it in and you start saying what you want. The thing I've found about Firebase is it can I found like there's a couple of issues before, but I'm sure they'll sort of sort themselves out really quick. And what's really good about Firebase is it does a lot of the back-end stuff for you as well. So in terms of lowering the barrier for entry, this is where you can build stuff up really quick and fast. So if you haven't already, check it out. It's pretty good. And it's set up to be developer friendly. Firebase itself, I think will get expensive as you kind of get past the initial development and start paying for the service. So that's the bit that I'm not 100% sure about. But in terms of speed of getting stuff running, it's pretty good. The other one that I've been playing around with this last week is Klein, which is an AI agent bot. And I'll show you some of this stuff later today. This is phenomenal. So with Klein, you can execute commands in more than just one command. So if you set up your prompt and you've kind of got a set of instructions, you can give it to Klein and it will go away and do a bunch of them and not just sort of one, which is what you currently get. It also has some sort of pretty exciting features in terms of being able to switch between planning mode and acting mode, which again, I'll cover off a little bit today. So Climb is really good. And if you haven't already, check it out. And I'll be having a session on Climb and a fork of Climb called Code in the next week or so. Gemini is still the best from a stats point of view. It hasn't changed. And so in terms of recommendation for me, Firebase and Visual Studio is my go-tos for developing this sort of stuff. Cursor and Windsurf are obviously are great and good choices as well. So let's get coding. Let's jump into the, let's set up a new folder, and we'll get cracking. So we're gonna set this up, and what is it? Recommend. Okay. That one. And then what we're going to do this time is, because we've got the prompts all in the, I'll just show you what this is. I've got it downloaded onto my computer, but in the repos section under the community guides, you'll find all the prompts in there. I'm just going to grab those prompts and stick them into the while we're about to start working. And then that'll give us the prompts to start with. So now we've got the prompts in here, which is great. And now we can start our planning process. We need to kind of figure out what we want to build from an API point of view. So I don't know if you guys want to throw any ideas into a chat, but happy to have a crack at anything at this point. Thinking maybe we could build. Actually, the one I did last time that was quite cool was one to do stock market. Some data and results coming back. So we'll have a crack at that. Again, I'm just going to switch this to edit mode. I'll show you Climb later on, but we're going to bring across all these prompts into here and just go through the process we went through last time. The next session we run will be different to this. So this is sort of showing you this process again. Create the docs folder, and then we'll say in the docs folder, I want you to create PID document for an API that provides stock market data. The stock market data for this API is going to be mock data. Use O2 Work Manager as your guide. Okay, so we're going to follow this through with the process that we've done previously, and then we're going to switch to Climb once we've got a process up and running that will show you something new. So what we're doing now, though, is we're creating this product requirements document. We'll come back and we'll read that through. We'll just check that it's looking correct. Okay, so what have we got? Simple, reliable API, looks for endpoints. Yeah, that all looks reasonable to me. Okay, that's cool. Okay, now we'll say using O3 solution architects. Okay, let's create docs. Architecture. This is a back-end application only, so we don't need anything on the front end for the front end. we're going to go through this and end up with a working API by the end of all this. So, well, fingers crossed. Well, it should happen. So, okay, so that's working off that. We've got our solution architecture document now, and document for a limited scope, providing mock data, monolithic structure using FastAPI. Let's just look at this in. Backend state is stateless. Technical stack Python, SQLite, SQLModel, yes. Authentication, no authentication, bunch of designs. Okay, that's looking good to me. So that is great. And then, yeah, we don't want to do anything beyond that. So that's looking good. Okay, great. Great. Now create a data. Now create username for data architects. Document docs. Data architecture, which outlines data architecture. Okay, let's see what that comes up with. At this point, we should get a decent kind of data guide, and using the prompt that we've got, which we'll have a quick look at again just to refresh your guys' memory. But the data architecture guide is talks about SQLModel and SQLite. We don't actually want SQLite, so we're probably going to have to come back and change this. And we don't want Prisma either, because we're not doing front end. But let's see what we come back and get. Okay, so this might not be quite right. Okay, using SQLite and SQLModel, define data structures. Okay, we're going to ask this to update it and say, please remove Prisma and the use of SQLite from the data architecture. At this point in time, we are using more data. Okay, and then we'll get to a point where we've got that updated. I do want the data architecture diagram drawn as well, because it's going to be helpful to actually have that drawn up properly. Okay, so let's get that out there. My database persistence is used. Yes. Now we've just got Python, which is great. And then, okay, the design rationale. So design rationale is prototype focus. So design prototype simplicity. And the general approach with any kind of development like this is go with the simplest thing that works first and build complexity as you go. We could build in a SQLite right from the start, but we won't in this case. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go back and build it, because I think it's useful. So I'm going to change my mind on that. Change my mind. But is to add that thing SQLite. It would be more realistic. Okay. So design rationale, the data will still be mock. We're not going to have, we will get the classes, and we will get the database diagrams in place. But I just want those as well. These, so if you're like an ERW, the relationship diagram, which would be helpful to actually sort of see what's going on in this. And then by the end of this, we'll then actually the next one, we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at the API prompt, because that's the one that then generates the endpoints. So Mermaids, which is used in Markdown for generating diagrams, will give us a little structure here. It's got an error, so we'll just pass that back in and fix it. And then we'll get a diagram up in a minute. We'll jump in a second to the API requirements, and we'll have a quick look through what we're trying to do in that first as well. Okay, so fingers crossed that works now. Let's have a quick look. No. Okay, what we're going to do at this point, because we're still getting an issue there. Okay. Just jump into ChatGPT and just try and solve this quickly. That's cool. We'll jump back in there and we'll look at the what we're trying to do with the API development next. So at this point here, we've got our data design, and now we want to design the endpoints and do it in a way which is going to make sense. So what we're asking for is design the detailed API structure for web app using high level guidelines set by the solution architect and data architect. Python, FastAPI, SQLModel, and SQLite, yes. Produce a comprehensive API design spec. That's what we want. So provide an implementation of the backend API prototype, ensuring it's robust, well documented, and here's the best practice. We need a product requirements document. We have these as inputs. And what we want is project structure, so routers, services, SQL models, and core logic. Middleware requirements, so logging and cores. Cores is what's used for making sure that your service has got protection. It's not just to be able to access being, and authentication is another part of it. And then design Pydantic models. This is important. So define detailed Pydantic models so that everything's got validation and serialized. You don't strictly need this, but it's nice to have. So it's a good thing to do. And then we'll design the endpoints as well. So this API guide is quite detailed. It's quite helpful as well. So now we're going to put in a prompt and say, okay, now I want, oh, by the way, sorry, I'm going to turn off the video at this point because you guys you want to see the code more than you want to see me. Sorry, I should have done it before. Okay, now I want you to follow 05 senior developer and creates an API guide in docs API. And now at this point, we should get an API guide come out. We've just jump back in here and see if this will work. Okay, now we've got an SD diagram, which is cool. You can get some quite sophisticated diagrams up using Mermaid. as you go, and it's worth actually documenting your stuff in a nice way with this. It's just more readable, you know, and it doesn't really cost much to do, so may as well from my point of view. Okay, we've got the API guides. Now let's have a read through this. This API provides realistic but mock stock data interface. Yes. The FastAPI present structure will be used. Yes. Okay, we've got the structure, which is looking good. So we've got main, we've got core, logic for create, update, delete, database session management. So this is following best practice. For the list of dependencies, we're not doing authentication. The endpoints will be grabbed under a single router, which is okay for now. I think it's not that complex. Okay, that's looking all right to me. And I think that's a good design. And now we're going to come back to the last point in this, and then we'll say, so that's good. Okay, now finally, following those 6 planner, wants to create detailed execution code to build this API in docs. So now we'll come up with a plan, and then we're actually going to switch to using client, which is going to be some new stuff that you guys haven't seen before. And I'm not sure if you have used it, but we'll give it a crack. So here we go. So now I get the plan. We'll read through the plan and make sure it makes sense as we go. And phase 1, set up the structure, add the API endpoints. Okay, that looks pretty reasonable. What have we got here though? We've got project setup and core models, mock data generation logic, yes. API endpoint implementation, yes. Documentation basic testing. I want to add into here a separate phase for testing. Please add in testing as a separate phase 5. To make it quite detailed and follow best practice. Also, the plan should include the folder structure and folder structure. At the end, make some detail. Now we're going to come up with a plan, and we'll have our folder structure we're looking to get, and we'll have a sort of a separate thing for testing, which we'll leave right until the end. This is generally the point I would spend a bit of time going back and forth just to make sure this is all being developed as it should be. It's okay. It was missed. It's actually missed out a whole bunch of taking out a whole bunch of stuff out. Oh, there we go. That's how we get back in. Let me wait for a second. Okay, so project setup. Yep. So that's great. So we've got a decent plan and a decent bunch of stuff. We're now going to switch to using client for a second, and I'm going to tell you why. So client is, if you're talking about AI coding, this is the next level from what we're doing at the moment. So it's an autonomous coding agent, and it's capable of executing commands of more than just one, but you can actually execute a whole stack, and you can kind of build it up from there. So this is really, really cool. We're going to close Copilot and come into here and open up client and bring it across so that we've got it over here. And then client has got a slightly different interface to what you've seen before, but in here you've got, and I'll just expand this a little bit so you guys can see it. You've got a whole lot of sort of setting things up here. And the important one is this approval stuff here. So this is where you can sort of say, you've got access to read project file, edit project files, execute commands and use the browser, and then how many requests you can make before it has to come back and ask you for the next thing. So I'm going to take a client and I'm going to say, because it doesn't know what we've created so far, so I'm going to needs to go back and read it. So I say, I want you to read all the files in docs. And actually, the other thing I want you guys to notice here is I'm on this plan point at this point in time. So client is not going to do anything until I've given it the permission to go ahead and act. So we're actually, this code enforces what I've kind of been taking us through, but it's more done through this tool, this agent. So it's really cool for me to put it. I want you to read all the files in doc and then come and then let me know if you would make any changes to the plan, or if you are happy implementing as is. Client is an autonomous agent. It uses a language model that you have configured. In this case, you can configure a range of different models right here. So you could choose a whole stack of them, and it's pretty much anything you want. In this case, I'm using OpenRouter, and through OpenRouter, I've set up Gemini 2.5. So you'll see down here that OpenRouter Google Gemini 2.5 Pro free means that I'm running this for free at this point in time, which is kind of nice. And it won't last, of course, but that's where we're at the moment. So that's how you set up your the language model that you use. What you get at the top here is a task, and it tells you, which you don't get in the other one, it tells you the amount of money you've spent so far, and it tells you the amount of your context window that you've used so far. So this has, at this point in time, gone through, and I'll get, for some reason, getting fails come back. I don't quite understand why. But it's gone through and it's read product requirements. It's read the API document. It's read the data architecture documents. Now it's reading the plan. And then it's going to come back and say, okay, I've read all that, and this is what I think. And let's see what it says here, because this will be more helpful. So I'm curious, actually, to see what it comes back with. Here's what I found. The direction seems clear. Okay, so the API and the plan was empty because I hadn't saved them. So that's a bit of a routine. So I'll just tell it to go back. Okay, I have saved API doc and the plan. Let's do this again. Now it's in plan mode, so it doesn't do anything. And this is what's actually really kind of helpful about this thing. What you find with when you're using Copilot is that it just goes away and starts doing stuff. And it's like, and if it doesn't know things, it'll just keep going. And so you end up with stuff which is not what you wanted, because you hadn't given it all the information that it needed. You didn't realize that was the case, and it just then makes a bunch of assumptions. So the ability to switch between plan and act is really useful. Rue code, which I'll cover off later, which is not in this session, but in a future session. Rue code is a fork of Clone, and it's got even more functionality. Okay, so now it's saying I've read the docs, and they provide a solid foundation. I'm ready to act, hit to toggle. So we'll switch to toggle. And now it's going to start building this out. Now, in theory, and I am having some issues with the APIs doing just that, but in theory, you could go away and, have lunch and come back, and this will just execute step after step, working through the plan. What's happening right now is that for some reason it's giving these errors. I haven't got the chance to debug it yet. I have to keep hitting retry, but you'll see that it eventually it'll start coding stuff up. And it's going to just go through and execute the plan. We're actually here at this point in time and kind of baby the prompt through because it's failing, but basically at this point we are now starting to create the kind of the documents that we would expect here. You guys will notice as well, or you might notice, but the structure of the documents here, there's sort of like some nice icons in there, and there's some nice different little bits and pieces. If you take the time to go through the community guide and you get down to this document in particular, it'll take you through how to set up Visual Studio to get similar sort of setup. And I recommend you do go through this document. I'll drop it in the chat because it's quite useful to go through that. There might be a few bugs in that one, so let me know if it's not quite what you expected. But that document will give you this up and running, and it gives you there's a couple of other features that I'll cover off in a video at some point, which is really useful. So unfortunately, I am having to keep clicking the retry because there's a bug there, but in theory, this would be running without me having to interface to it at all. And it's got a good plan, so it'll just keep kind of ticking through and doing all this stuff. As it ticks through, you'll see the context window tick up, and you can see the number of tokens that you've used. So our context window currently is 23,000 tokens. As it gets bigger, obviously it gets larger. And at this point in time, you can see that it's able to keep everything in the context window. So all of the files that it's making, it knows about. And obviously, as your code base gets to a certain point, you get to a point in time where that's no longer the case. And that's where you need to start to be a little bit careful about how you develop stuff. But right now, we're using a different model to what we used with the Copilot. We're using an AI agent in this case to do our developments. And it's going through and just doing a bunch of steps according to a plan. And in theory, this would actually run through the entire plan and create it with sort of a one-shot type of prompt, which is kind of the goal of AI coding, is to get to a point where you can just give it one really good plan and it will go through and do it. What do we got now? We've got our session coming through. We've got the database, we've got our stock models coming through. The requirements is there as well, so that's all coming together quite nicely. We'll go through and just create a bunch of stuff, and then we'll actually start debugging things and getting it running in a second. So I'm kind of happy with how this is coming together. This is looking like as I would expect for this sort of application. And we will go back and have a look at the code and sort of see if it's making sense. Okay, we're getting our all of our database operations here, which is great. Our models. The main function here you'll see is using FastAPI, which is what we'd asked for. And the API will actually have a title up there, which is kind of cool. We should get to the end of this where we can actually run the API and then sort of see it and see the documentation and kind of test some stuff. So that's the goal we're trying to get to. Okay. Just kind of keep ticking through at this point. I think let's have a look at where we are in the plan. I'm not sure if it's been updating the plan as we go. It's not. So we'll ask it to go back and update the plan just so we can see where it's at. But what it's saying from here is saying that the API directly is created. Okay, so it's through phase one. taking a little longer than I expected, but that's okay. We'll kind of just keep going through. I haven't really been paying attention to it as well. We're talking. So now we're creating the endpoints. So if we have a look at this, we can actually see the get endpoints, get quote. It's all get functions. There's no put in this case. So database, our API is all of that. We've got responses 401, 42, yep. So that's looking okay. So now it's made the quotes documents or endpoints. Now it's making the next one. And obviously it's following the structure that we asked it to follow, which is good. And final step in phase 3. Okay, so it's in the final step of phase 3, which is we've done the mock data logic, we're doing the API. The next one is going to be the documentation. So once we've got the documentation, then we can follow the documentation and see if we can get this thing running. And there will be some bugs, like for sure there will be some bugs, but probably less than you might sort of think. Okay, now we're doing the documentation, which is great. And I need to update my prompts to say that I use UV as opposed to pip. So I'll get it to update the documentation with that. And now we're up to a massive 36K, 1 million tokens. So there's so much like memory left to go. You know, we could do quite a big code base before we ran out of context window. But it's really useful to see where that's at. Like it's really useful to see how much of the context window we've used and of these tokens, like how much we're actually using. And then of course it's useful to see how much all this is costing you. Okay, great. It's done the document. It's not going to do the steps 5 just yet. Asking me can I implement the command? And I'm going to say no because I want to actually do it myself. So let's go and create a terminal window in here. And now what we're going to do is just go through the README and see. So we're going to please update the README to take into account the fact I will be using UV rather than. This will appear in some of the community guides as to why you should use UV instead of pip for this sort of stuff. It's just so much faster and so much better. But I will add some stuff in very shortly around it. Pip's the standard, but before too long you'll find that UV will have taken over because it literally installs stuff 100 times faster. It's just great. Okay. So we'll just finish this off and then we'll follow through the instructions and then we'll spend a bit of time getting the API running. And that should give us some time to finish out the session. Of course, this has gone sort of, nice and smoothly because, well, say smoothly, we haven't tried to run anything yet, but it's gone like well to plan so far because we actually took the time to put in place a good plan. Let's just now we'll try and oops. Okay, you'll see as well that you can actually have client in the same window as the other one, but I'm going to move it across to here because I want it on the side because it's useful. Yeah. Okay, so here's our structure. Here's the sort of thing to do. So we need to make our virtual environment. Oops, don't put any time. Then we need to activate that. When that activates, you'll see the virtual environment pop in on the side of the prompt here. So now we've got this virtual environment we're running. And then we've got to install the requirements for this application. So now we've got the requirements installed, which is great. And that was why I didn't want this to go and start running that command, because we didn't have those things installed. So now ensure the .env file exists, which it does. Let's see what we've actually got in there. Okay, we've got some stuff in there, which is what we're supposed to have. So now we can run the API, and this is kind of where we see if it works on them. So, okay, so as expected, we got a few errors, and we'll just feed those back in and incrementally solve these. So this time we're not using copilots, we're using client once again, and it's going back and being like, okay, I need to go fix these. We could have, if we'd wanted to, switch back to plan before we just went and sort of just started changing stuff. And it probably wouldn't have been a bad idea to do that. The thing about client is you actually have these checkpoints here, so you can go back to a different point in time if you want to. So now it's wanting to run stuff again, and we don't want it to. We want to run it ourselves. It looks like it actually started up, so that's cool. So but damn, sometimes it screws up the ports, when you shut it down without doing it properly. Okay, so now we need to reactivate our virtual environment. And then we need to run the command. I just actually want to check that command is, because I want to run it up in a different port, because that port might have been screwed up. Give me a sec, so there it goes. Okay, so let's which benefit is now 20. Okay, so now we're running on 8.20, and we have an API running. So this is cool. So welcome to the stock market data API. Now remember I said at the start that FastAPI includes the docs. So if we go to docs, we should actually get a list of our documentation for the API, which we do, which is fantastic. So at this point in time, we've got the documentation's up and running. We've got our mock data there. We can actually test these endpoints. And through the documentation here, you can actually, you can test it through this. So we can go try it out. So execute and give us back the symbols. And now we get back actual data. So through this documentation, this isn't just documentation that is here that gives you an idea of the APIs. It actually also gives you the ability to execute stuff and try it out. So this is really helpful. This will also by default create redoc, I believe, and it's a similar thing to Swagger, but I personally think that is a little bit nicer from a documentation point of view. So here we've got some, we can grab this now, and so we can actually jump into here and run that and see our JSON will come back as we would expect. So I'm pretty impressed by this. Like, we've actually been able to come in here and get something up and running without it having anything sort of false. Okay, the mock data came back and it's correct, although there's not a lot of it. But we could start to test this now using Postman and sort of see if we can get to a point where it's doing what it should. but it's looking good to me. You know, we've got a database structure which is looking okay. Let's have a quick look at the database repo. Oops. We need mock data, and here we can see it's not looking quite well. It's interesting. Okay. So we're going to go back and actually now say the mock data is a bit just cancel that. And now we're going to say the mock data is pretty iffy. It's pretty thin on the ground. It's pretty thin. Please add in a mock data generator that gives us a decent amount of mock data. I'm going to do this, get this mock data up and running to a certain point, and then we're going to go back and actually do the tests, because what we haven't done right now is we haven't done the tests. And so if we look at our plan, we'll actually get the plan as well. Just first we're going to get a bit more mock data in place. Oh, you'll see as well, yeah, these windows get a bit screwy on this use of client. So we'll just close these ones out so we can see what's going on. And it's generating more mock data. It's got a function that's going to call stack times. Oh, that's cool. Okay, that's good. That's that error with the API. Don't need to mind that. Okay, so what's it saying? It's got updated it's going through adding in, so we've got a bit more mock data coming through, and then we'll go back and get it to update the plan, and then we'll get it to do the tests. And we've got to a point I think is pretty good. You know, we've got functional API, we've got good documentation. Yes, it's only mock data, but to be honest, this gives you everything you need to to go and develop the front end, knowing that you've got a solid API design in place that's been designed to a good spec. And I wouldn't want to sort of create like actual data at this point in time. I would want to have it where it's running off mock data until I've got to a point where I kind of knew the data structure was correct. So it becomes easier to navigate stuff and change it around, which is cool. Okay. So we've got a bunch of stuff. We can, of course, obviously go through that documentation and test if everything's working. That's the next thing we're going to do is actually write the tests so we can see how that works. So we've got now still cranking through this. We'll then skip into the tests, and then we've got 20 minutes left. We'll see how far we get the tests. It's really annoying this way that it's failing this at the moment. I will figure out what that is, but this isn't how this would normally work. Like normally you would just leave it to run. But because the API request fails for some reason, I have to kind of keep coming back and prompting it to continue. Great, just updated that. So now let's say to it, figure-8, now please update the plan with what you have completed, and also start implementing the tests. So we'll come back and actually have a look at the plan once it's got that updated, and then we'll have a quick look at our structure here. And what we should see is that structure is obviously will match what we had asked for, because it followed that plan. So that's good. We've got our mock database down here. We've got an up-to-date README down here, and Now we're going to have an updated plan very shortly. We're going to see what that's done. So let's have a quick look at this once it's finished. So that's done, and we just see what that plan looks like now. Phase 1, phase 2, implement logic to potentially seed from a static file. Okay, that's a good point. We don't actually have that. We don't sort of need it at this point. Start the endpoints, set up documentation, conduct initial code review for clarity, structure adherence to design docs. Yep, okay, that's the point. And now we're doing some unit tests. So we'll actually, that's good that it's got those steps into the plan because it will get it to come back and do that. Particularly because in the case of client, we can see that everything is still very much within the context window, even after all this code that was written. And so going back and kind of confirming everything's correct, it knows everything. We could equally go back and say to it, go read through all files and get up to speed on all the documents, and it will go and do it. But in this case in point, because we've just been coding with one thing right from the start, it knows all the context because it sort of wrote it. If you come to a code base which you haven't, you're working with for the first time, you can come into here and you can say to the client, read through the code base and figure out what's there, and then come back and tell me what you think sort of needs to be changed, or let's come up with a plan what needs to be changed, and you can work through creating a plan, all that sort of stuff. This is so annoying. So now it's starting to create some tests down here, and we're probably not going to get to a point where we can run too much of the tests, but we'll be able to get to a point where we can run some of it at least, which is cool. So it's done the conf test. What else have you got to go here? Okay, so it's setting up the fixtures, directory for the API integration tests, and then we'll get it to create like a README to sort of say how to implement the tests. And where we want to get to is we actually want to get to a point where we've got test coverage of, like, not, you never sort of really want to get to 100% of your code because it's just wasted effort. Although, having said that, with AI, it's pretty easy to burn that effort. But you want to get to a point where your tests are comprehensive. So when your AI goes and changes something that you didn't realize, that your tests pick it up, and that's the way you kind of get this to work quite well. You can also get your AI to actually write tests as it changes code. So there's ways of telling your code, hey, I want you to, whenever you change code, I want you to update the tests that go with it. Now you can see here down here, as it's changing these files, because of the way that FastAPI works, each time a file is saved, this will actually restart and recommit. And so the application is continuing to sort of run. To refresh its state. And so we could go back and see the API updating as this sort of works along. All right, we've now got a chunk of our tests implemented. We've got 15 minutes left. So we're going to try and get to the point where we can run these tests, and then we'll jump back and close out the session. Okay, it's cool. Still running the tests. Gemini 2.5 is nice and fast at building code. At this point, this is where I want to actually go through and read the code and make sure it's making sense. We just can't let it run because it's a tutorial, but I wouldn't trust stuff that wasn't read through, and I would want to make sure that the structure was correct. But that's the sort of the next step in this. The fact that I have to keep hitting the retry button has probably slowed us down by about, 5-10 minutes on this tutorial, I'd say. And it also means I can't go off and look at a bunch of stuff while this is doing its thing, which normally you'd be able to do. So, but client and brew code is more useful than what I'm showing you here. They do actually go through and do a bunch of stuff. Okay, so now it's updating the plan, which is great. And now we can see that it's done a bunch of integration tests, and but it hadn't done the unit tests. So it's going to go through and do the unit tests now, which is actually what you're seeing coming out of the structure. So we've got the tests, which has got the API tests, and we've got the unit tests of the kind of the more fundamental database instructions. You can see though that like it's not like there's a lot of actual coding going on here. It's more prompting and letting it do its thing, which is kind of interesting. But it's just insane, like how much work this does here. And of course, the sweet price right now of $0 is what I've paid for this because I'm running Gemini through OpenRouter, and Gemini at this point in time is free. Okay, so we're making the test documents. We'll be able to run this in a second. We will update the README to give you clear instructions as to how to run the test. But we've got a good plan. We've got an API that works, and now we're going to have some test code that actually does it. The API is not functional data, but we could easily make it download and load up a CSV. So, it's pretty good as a way of getting up a API for an application like nice and fast. Yeah, it's probably, we'll see how we go for time if we get there. Okay, now it's updating the plan, and we might stop it at this point. So we don't need it to complete everything. Although, it's doing a git ignore, so that's cool. But that's okay. Well, that's great. And I think that's looking pretty good, actually. Yeah. And we don't want it to go back and refactor, so we're gonna cancel it at this point. And now we're going to say, okay, now update the README file with details on how to run the tests. But it's now at the end of all this, we're now at almost up to a 10th of our context window. So you can see where if we kept coding to a point, you wouldn't run out of this, and you would get to a point where you needed to start to treat your code in a modular fashion. So this becomes important. But it's useful that you can actually track it through here. It's a lot clearer on client as to where you're at in the context window than it is on visual on Copilot, in my opinion. But these errors are kind of annoying. Like I'm literally all I'm asking to do now is update the README so we can run it and see what's coming back. Okay, so so that's cool. So now we've got our tests running, and now we're going to just have a quick read of this. And we're just going to stop that, and then we'll make sure we've got everything installed. There's some new packages that have come available. Now we can run PyTest, and in theory that should run our tests. And it looks like we're missing library at this point. Let's just see what we do with that. Okay. I've just taken that offline to run a question through what might be the cause of that. And yeah, you're just going to get that set up. And then we'll run our tests, and that'll take us to the point where we've got an application with tests in place, which I think is like a pretty good spot to get to. We are creeping up to 10% of contesting now. By the way, what I did before was I said I've got this error and it means this, so replace that with that, and that's quite helpful to do that sort of thing of figuring out what's required, just so you don't end up making silly mistakes. But you can do it in here now as well, just by switching between the plan and the end mode. Okay, so that's updated. We'll run our tests now and see if that works. Cool. So we are now running tests. Not all the tests have passed. And that's what you would expect. But at this point in time, we can now start just feeding the tests that are failing back through the system and get into the point where all the tests are kind of closed out. And we'll get to a point there where we get, so where do we get to? We won't finish getting all the tests running on this session, but we've got a bunch of tests that I don't know what they're called for actually. Yeah, fail, fail. Okay, we can do better than that. Let's see if we can get better than 0% of the test passing. That's pretty bad. But that's cool. Like, we're actually now testing stuff, and it's, if the assumptions aren't right, then the test will pick it up. And when we get the tests at the point where they're running well, we've got like code you can actually maintain over time. I tend to take a little bit of time in when I'm doing this, like for real, of actually getting the tests working correctly, because when the code changes, the test will pick up if it's no longer kind of working, and you'd be like, okay, you need to go back and fix that. So that's cool. We got the test getting updated. And it will take like more time than we've got to get these tests 100% passing. And as I said, I don't get too fussed about having 100% of coverage with tests, because particularly when code is moving around a bit, you don't want to waste your time writing tests when you're still doing the code. So when it gets to a certain point, you guys would know, from your experience of when that is. But it is best to write like tests so that you've got the core functions kind of tested, but not get too pedantic about getting everything sorted out. Okay, we've got our tests now updated. We'll do this final pass, and then we'll jump back to the documentation, and we will close out the session. Okay, so where do we get to with our tests? We got a bunch of tests that were skipped, and a bunch of tests where there was some errors. And but it's better in that it's not all false. So we would need to spend more time getting those tests running. But the test structure is good. Let's just have a quick look at the test structure that we've got here. We've got, I'm just going to close client now. We've got all of our tests that run through the code. We've got the API tests, which is testing the different endpoints, which is good. And I'm a little disappointed we didn't get to the point of getting the tests, like at least a couple of them running, but we were taking a bit of time on the way. So that's pretty good. Okay, so where did we get to? Sorry, I just need to find my right window. Okay. We got through, we got an application up and running, API up and running. We didn't get the testing running, but we've got a plan for it and we're working through the plan. So that's pretty good. You guys have got the instructions there now to help you with all this stuff. So if you jump into the website here, you'll be able to jump into this community guide. Now, right now, the community guide doesn't have anything much around the API. I will put this code up on there, so that code will be up in this live coding outputs because it's, the code is quite kind of nice. And I will at some point put some detail in the session notes around APIs, so you've got that to refer to. So there's some missing bits in here right now. I would really appreciate, once that's up, if you guys use it, if you provide feedback as to what's good and what's bad about the kind of the code that's been put up, or the guide that's been put up. And of course, the guides that's going up is going to be like kind of stuff to get you started. There's some pretty good stuff in there, but there's going to be some stuff which is sort of next level that will be running through the school. If you want to join up to that, jump into here and pre-register through the website, and that'll take you to a point where there's some kind of additional stuff that'll get you running at a faster speed through all that stuff. So that's if that's your cup of tea, then you get be able to go a bit faster through that. The hackathon is coming up in a little bit of time. Now, coming back to what we were talking about here, the best way to develop your skills in this is what the research says, is to practice in groups, learn deliberately, get frequent feedback, reflect often. So by all means, go away and have a crack at doing this, in yourself by your own time. That's what I do. It's fantastic. But you absolutely will learn fastest if you do this in a group. Like, there's just no question about it. It's what the research is really clear on. So jump onto Discord if you haven't already. Obviously, you guys are on the sessions, kind of going through all this stuff. Check out the learning resources and get involved. And the hackathon is a really great way to sort of get involved in the community stuff. There's a session coming up next Thursday where I'm going to take people through the plan of what will be involved in the hackathon. Now, even if you're not going to attend the hackathon, I'd encourage you to join the session, because just seeing how that all comes together will kind of help you understand, it will help you cement some of your understanding, and be kind of a good way to kind of get involved a bit. If you want to work with me direct, feel free to reach out. I provide courses and training and all this stuff, mentorship if you want one-on-one stuff. And obviously, if there's projects you guys are wanting work on, then we can do that. I will also do my best to reach out to you guys on LinkedIn as well. So follow me. There's stuff I'm posting up on there that keeps people abreast. These videos go up on the website, so on the YouTube channel, so feel free to jump on there. Discord, obviously jump in there and get involved. And the GitHub is what we've been talking through from the community guide, which is hopefully useful. Volunteering is done again through the community website, so jump on there and volunteer. Actually, when you volunteer, if you do volunteer, you'll get a little form where you can then say kind of how you want to go about doing it, and then a little bit there about where you want to get involved. So that's a good way to do it.